You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't.
Hello, listeners. I'm Bela Musitz, host for this episode of the 15 Minutes Share Your Voice podcast, where we talk with top-notch law firms and attorneys about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing. They deliver tailor-made services to help your law firm accomplish its objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and to make sure you're getting the best return on investment, your firm needs to have better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. Today's guest on the podcast is Hailey Hawkins. Hailey is a managing partner at a law firm in North Carolina, where she focuses on estate administration and guardianships. She serves as one of the public guardians of the estate for incompetent adults in Gaston County, and as a guardian ad litem for incompetency proceedings. Before becoming a lawyer, she taught high school math through Teach for America in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. Welcome to the podcast, Hailey.
Thanks for having me.
So, Hailey, can you tell us a little bit more about the law firm?
Absolutely. So we actually we have an interesting journey. In 2017, it was myself and Stefan Hedgedis, and we had a law firm that we were just starting on our own. So it was just the two of us. And then in COVID happened. In 2021, we were approached by another law firm who asked if we wanted to merge with them. So we ended up merging in 2021. And as a result, we became Stott, Hollowell, Windham Stancil. And we now went from being a two-person law firm to then a three-person law firm to now we have about 9 attorneys.
Oh, wow.
9 full-time attorneys. So it's been a very drastic change in the past couple of years.
Yeah. And tell our listeners a little bit about sort of your area of practice.
Absolutely. So I do estates. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective on estates because normally when you hear someone talk about estates, they're talking about high net worth estate planning. And I actually do a little bit of the other extreme of that. So my area of focus is guardianships. So what I do is I will do estate administration. So I'll actually administer wills and help people with powers of attorney when things actually happen. But one of the other areas I do is if someone is declared incompetent, so are unable to act, I help people through that process. And I can either help family members assisting other family members or family and friends, or I can serve in that capacity as well.
Oh, wow. So that sounds like a very highly specialized area of the law.
It is. It became very famous recently with Britney Spears incident and some of the other celebrities who have guardianship or conservatorship in other states. It's not really that dramatic or exciting in the real world necessarily. Most people, when you're declared incompetent, there's not necessarily a lot of question about whether you need help or not. And it is very regulated. So you're also not at risk of losing absolutely everything like you hear on the news either.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say I called you up and I said, hey, my mom is, getting up there. She's got Alzheimer's. She really can't make decisions for herself. Take me through sort of the conversation you and I would have, the questions you would ask me, and sort of what the next steps might be.
Absolutely. So one of the first things is always, was there any planning prior to the diagnosis? Because one of the best ways that we can help people is try to get as much planning done as possible prior to any situation happening. If that's the case, it's much more straightforward because then it becomes okay, well, let's get those documents. This is what these documents mean. This is how you use them. Where we run into more issues is if the person did not properly plan. And if there's no documents in place, then we start talking about an actual medical diagnosis. So did the person receive a medical diagnosis that would say that they actually need a guardian or someone else making those decisions? We need to collect the proper medical documentation, and then we can submit everything to the court and say this person needs to be declared legally incompetent, and we're asking who should be appointed as the guardian. And there's two different types of guardians. In North Carolina, we have a guardian of the person and a guardian of the estate. In other states, the guardian of the estate is called a conservatorship. So that's probably a phrase more commonly known.
Got it. So what are the types of things that we can do in advance?
The best thing you can possibly do is your estate planning documents. So the will, the healthcare power of attorney, the durable power of attorney. Again, normally when you're talking about the high net worth estate planning attorneys, which I know most people talk to, they'll stress the will, they'll stress trust, they'll stress these other documents that deal with end of life. Where I tend to put a little bit more emphasis is what happens when you're still alive, and who do you want making those decisions? So those powers of attorney are some of the best defense mechanisms you can have, because you're essentially giving someone the full legal authority to make your medical decisions, make your financial decisions, sell all your property, buy new property, get rid of your assets, get new assets. It's a very powerful document, but when used properly, it can really avoid a lot of drama in the courts.
Yeah. And so I had a power of attorney with my mom. So I went through this relatively recently. Yeah. And, it was pretty easy to set up. When we did it, we did this while she was competent. Mm-hmm. And, it was a 45-minute meeting in an attorney's office, signed some documents, and that was it. It was pretty easy. So it seems like if you do this in advance and you plan ahead, it's a pretty smooth, straightforward process. And I imagine that once maybe there's a diagnosis of incompetence or an inability to execute a document, then it becomes a little more complicated.
Correct. It's the difference between, and just to kind of put this in monetary perspective. So for that power of attorney, you probably paid a couple $100.
Right.
For a guardianship, the starting fee, and this is here in Gaston County, North Carolina, which is, you're talking about several thousand just to get it started. And the court is going to assess fees. So in the event that you have the entire estate passing through a guardianship, you're actually paying a court fee in North Carolina, $4 for every $1,000 plus a bond. So it's a substantial fee. And I always tell people when I'm trying to stress, the best possible thing you can do is tell everybody, get your power of attorney, make sure your documents are in place, because if not, the consequences are pretty dire. Yeah.
So is there I'm just curious now. So is there a difference, like I don't have a power of attorney, and let's say I got in a car accident tomorrow and I was deemed incompetent. Does my wife automatically sort of have that power or no?
Not in North Carolina. So I think a lot of people assume, and that's why I say the biggest thing, I'm hoping this podcast can help with that too. I think people assume that spouses have automatic rights to do a lot of things. And the truth is they don't. And parents don't for minor children either. So minor children who are beneficiaries on a will or have to do something that requires legal action, they also need to have a guardian appointed. And it's not automatically a parent. So I think some of these technicalities, I encourage everybody, frankly, over the age of 18, if you're over the age of 18, get a healthcare power of attorney. If you have assets, I don't care how old you are, you're never guaranteed tomorrow.
Right.
You should have these documents in place. And I think, unfortunately, what I hear from you is what I hear from a lot of people is they don't realize, they always assume we're estate planning in this regard. You need someone older or somebody who is closer to end of life or closer to having dementia. And the truth of the matter is, at that point, we're too late. We can't do all the proper planning. So the best remedy you can possibly do is right now, encourage everybody, go see a local attorney, get your estate planning documents in place.
Oh, that's great advice. Like you said, I think most people assume, assumption is a dangerous word, that, my spouse can take it, or if I have minor kids, I'm automatically, but that's not true. And like, we always think about this as like with my mom, it was after my dad passed, it was just my mom. And then, being her favorite son, I got that responsibility. So that's really good advice.
Well, and I think it's funny you say my favorite son. I always laugh because the other fun parts of guardianship are when families don't get along.
Yeah.
So if you don't get to pick who you would want to serve, all of a sudden you have everyone thinking they're the favorite son and arguing over who should get to make those decisions. And those always turn into an exciting adventure of, well, you haven't visited in 3 months, or you don't make as good decisions. I make better decisions. And it can create a little bit of family drama.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my case, being the favorite son was easy because I'm the only one. So what you just said also sort of reminds me that this can be a very emotional time for the people that you're dealing with.
Yes.
And, again, if you pre-plan, it's kind of less emotional. There's less stress going on in everyone's life. So how do you sort of help people through that emotional challenges that they're encountering?
Yes. That's actually a great thing you bring up. I think one of the unique things that we try to do even here is when I hire, I'm hiring for someone who can be compassionate.
Yeah.
And really listen to people, because we always tell our team, we are helping people through the worst time of their lives. Watching your parents slowly die and have a horrible illness, or watching a spouse, or dealing with the aftermath, because like I said, we do the estate administration as well. It's a lot of hand holding. It is a lot of listening. I think this is probably the most I've talked in days. Most of the time I just listen, and you just have to let people really express their emotions. And sometimes, they take it out in the wrong way, but for the most part, I still like to think most people are still good at heart and innocent, and just haven't experienced something like this and don't know what the law is in this area, because it is such a more niche area. So I think when you're going through it, you're experiencing things that you never experienced and didn't know you'd have to experience. So it's just unique. A lot of patience, a lot of kindness, a lot of understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure can be very stressful at times, for sure.
It definitely has its moments. And I think, unfortunately, for better or worse, we also get to see people, the true side of humanity. Like at its core, how are people responding? How are families responding? I think it has influenced how my entire team looks at how we live our lives, and how we raise our families, and how we interact with each other and with spouses. And similar to hospice nurses, you hear hospice nurses say that sometimes too, when they're talking about what matters at the end of life. We get to watch families go through that, for better or worse, on a daily basis. And you see a lot of people really rise to the occasion and be these amazing family members. And then you see some that maybe don't. And what can tear families apart. So I think it's helpful on our side to give us a better understanding of where people are coming from. And I think that allows us to provide better service even in the planning stages, just to say, well, let's talk through what happens if this happens. Because I think, again, the high net worth is a different conversation altogether. But this part of the conversation is, okay, so when this actually happens, how is your family going to respond? Yeah. And let's be honest about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. That's really, really good advice, and some thank you for sharing those thoughts. Yeah, so let's say that I'm listening to this podcast and I go, okay, I got to get my act together. Yeah. I need to do some of these things. And I don't live in Gastonia County in North Carolina there. What should I look for if I'm, going to call up and interview a couple of attorneys? What type of questions should I ask?
You want to make sure you're getting someone who actually does estate planning. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can possibly do is make sure that it is somebody who actually knows what they're doing, what they're talking about, and isn't dabbling in estate planning. I think where we see a lot of mistakes, unfortunately, because so as a firm, we also do some of the litigation sides of things. So when things go wrong, when things are not clearly explained, we help with that. And one of the biggest areas we tend to see is people who do not necessarily practice in these areas regularly saying, oh, I can draft you a will. I learned how to do that in law school. And I always say, look at people's websites. I do believe that the website is really significant. If you see that the attorney focuses in estate planning, or if there's estate planning on their website and it appears to be a primary practice area, they're probably a really good resource. Different states have different rules on board certified specialization. I can't say go to one necessarily because I'm not one yet, but I do think that that's helpful as well. Just getting personal recommendations in the area, saying who someone knows. I think lawyers tend to know who's good in practice areas from a different perspective.
Yeah. So that brings up an interesting question. How do you guys find your clients?
So we are a lot of word of mouth, admittedly. Gaston is kind of unique. It's right on the outside of Charlotte. So we are not in the Charlotte area. We do practice in Charlotte, but we are right outside of Charlotte. It's a smaller county. So as a result, there's, I want to say 100, 150 people in our bar. It's a very small bar. We all know each other pretty well. So a lot of it is word of mouth, and you get a reputation for how you handle cases. We advertise online, we write blogs, we do all the more traditional things where some of my younger team members are venturing into TikTok. We'll see how that goes. I'm a little bit more hesitant on that, but we try to do the online marketing. We do a lot of the advertising in the community, but most of it is word of mouth.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So, another question I had is the whole firm all focused on this area, or is it just certain attorneys?
Just me, actually. So I'm the only one doing guardianships. So how we've structured our firm, and I think that's where it's allowed us to also get this word of mouth referral basis. Every attorney focuses on one of these little niche areas, essentially. So as a firm, we're able to offer multiple different practice areas. We have real estate. We actually do have 3 attorneys who do real estate because we do residential and commercial. We have petitions to partition. We have surplus funds. We have estate administration. We have family law. We have an attorney who does family law. She's wonderful. And then we have a civil litigator who kind of does a little bit more of the breach of contract, personal injury type of situation. So it's nice because we can offer these different practice areas, but everyone has their own area that they focus on. And we can also bounce ideas off each other. So if I have an issue with a real estate question, I'm not going to try to figure it out myself. I'm going to walk across the hallway and go ask one of my partners. Yeah,
no, that's great. That sounds like a very nice legal firm put together with a bunch of different skills that for a client can come to one place and get that broad spectrum of advice and services and counsel. That's great.
Yeah. So
let's talk a little bit about sort of the merger, right? There's a fair number of attorneys who sort of listen to this podcast. And so can you, whatever you're comfortable sharing, kind of talk about sort of what that process was like for you guys? Okay, why'd you decide to do it? And then sort of what maybe what's some of the surprises going through that process?
Well, you'll probably have to cut me off. I feel like I could talk on this for hours. It was a very unique experience across the board. It was December of 2020. So just to kind of put that back in context, right at the end of COVID. And I actually at the time had COVID. So I I was working remotely in my house, and my law partner at the time came up and said, hey, I heard a rumor that this firm might want to merge with us. And I brushed it off at the time. I was like, I don't expect this to happen. It was so Stott Hollowell, just for a little bit of context there, this firm had been around since the 40s. It's been around for a very long time. Apparently, COVID hit hard. And it was a firm that the name meant a lot. It's this huge building in Gastonia. It was one of the largest law firms in Gaston County, which again, it's a small county, but it was one of the larger ones in Gaston County. So it was a surprise for them to approach us, and very humbling in many ways, because it was just, we were a small firm. There were a lot of surprises that came. I think we did our due diligence. We spoke with a business attorney as well. I would strongly recommend getting real advice from people who actually know what they're doing on that. We did consult with a business attorney. We worked with an ERISA attorney trying to merge 401ks, which was probably one of the more surprising parts of how difficult it was merging a 401k. I never want to experience that again. More major shout out to ERISA attorneys there. And then the personnel is probably one of the most unique things for a merger. Is you're inheriting staff from one team and you're bringing your own staff in. And Stott Hollowell in particular, as you can probably guess just from how old the firm is, the majority of the members of this firm were also older. And Stefan and I are much younger in the grand scheme of things. I was licensed in 2014. So we tend to have a much different approach, very different approach on how we approach law, how we approach life, a lot of different things. So trying to merge cultures that were that different, the old school mentality with the newer age mentality, I would say probably took us about 2 full years. I would say this past month is when I would actually feel comfortable saying, I think we might have reached a good balance of where everybody is. So those were probably some of the more challenging aspects of it. I think now I can also comfortably say that it was all worth it. Now, we also had a unique situation. One of the partners in the original firm in Stott Hollowell, so we merged April 1st of 2021. He did estates. He died April 19th, 2021. And so here I am, we newly merged firm. I'm the estates attorney, and I inherited about 85 estate cases. And he didn't use any computer. He didn't have anything on a computer. It was these thick files, like paper files. I'm like, I don't even know how to do this. I haven't picked up a paper file in years. So we had a lot of very unique challenges this first couple of years. We're in a good place. And then we were incredibly, incredibly humbled this past year. Jesse Caldwell, who's a big name down here, but he was a Superior Court judge. He lost his election, and he asked if he could join us.
Oh, wow.
So we were incredibly excited about that. We did bring him in. He is our civil litigator. So it's kind of come full circle. We're now at a good point where we're growing and can see the forward momentum. So it's been exciting, but it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, it sounds like it. In my previous life, I was the interim president of a small college, and we merged with a larger college. So I've been through that. And as you were talking there, it brought back some of those memories of the challenges, particularly on the cultural piece.
Yeah.
And lots of times people don't pay much attention to that until something bubbles up and explodes, and they go, oh my gosh. Because you get tied up in sort of the details of, the buildings and the equipment and the ERISA plans.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it brought back some memories.
And I think I think you're right, though, because the culture is what led to, like, we didn't go in with any intention on letting anybody go. That was not, I think some people assume that with
Right.
mergers, but some people didn't work out just because not intentionally. It just, it's a hard shift. It's a hard shift for a lot of people at a lot of levels.
Yes. And there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
And when some people deal very well with an unknown future, other people have a real challenge with dealing with an unknown future. And so trying to figure out what different people need for their level of comfort, if you will. And as you said, sometimes it just doesn't work, and that's okay. And you sort of look each other in the eye and say, this is great, you've been wonderful, but it's just not working. So let's figure out something different. Yeah, those are challenging times. So you started as a math teacher, so I'm interested in this, right? So you're teaching math, and you're in this kind of program for math. And so talk a little bit about the transition of saying, okay, I'm going to become an attorney.
Well, so I taught through Teach for America, which is normally a 2-year program. I was not a math major. I was a psychology major. So how it works is they decide where you go and what you teach. So
Wow.
It took me, I was from Pennsylvania, actually. They were like, you're going to go to Charlotte, North Carolina. You're going to teach high school math. And they had a very intense summer program where they teach you how to teach. And then while you're teaching, you're taking classes in math and getting certified as a teacher. So I did eventually get my math and teacher certification while I was teaching. Teaching is probably the hardest job I have ever done and will ever do. It is, I think it was a phenomenal experience, and it gave me so much insight into the public school education system from a different perspective. I will never look down on those years. I mean, that was just an amazing experience and a lot of great time with those years. But I'm also, it's hard. Teaching is very hard. And after my second year was actually when I met who is now my husband. We were both bartending at Cheddar's on the side, and he was in law school. So as I started looking at what he was doing, I was like, I think I could do this, and decided to try that after my third year. Went to law school, and then originally thought I was going to get back into education law. To be completely honest, if you would have asked me in law school if I was going to do estates, I would have said very strongly no. I was like, I can't imagine just dealing with dead people all day. That's depressing. Like, why would anyone want to choose that? So I thought I'd be getting into education law, but I veered away. The focus with education law is just different than what I thought it was going to be. So I ended up focusing a lot more on originally family law. Did family law for a couple of years. Thankfully, Joy joined us and took that all off my plate. So I gave that happily to her, and then kind of found my niche with the state. So a lot of, I'm a very firm believer in trial and error, and more error and failure has kind of led to where I am now, I guess. But trying different things, seeing what else is out there, and then finding something that I actually was really passionate about and then can be good at.
Yeah. That's great life advice, quite honestly, right? That's a great way to start wrapping this up. So let me ask you a question. Where can our listeners find out more about your law firm?
Absolutely. So we are online. Stott, Hollowell, Windham Stancil. So it's shws.law.
Yep. Very nice website. I've been there. Very informative, very well done. So that's great. So Hailey, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
One of the things that I think makes our firm a little bit more unique as well, because we are in Gaston County and we are a suburb of Charlotte, Gaston is a very red county. we are a very inclusive firm. And I think that's the other thing I would encourage since you said mostly lawyers are listening to this, I think when we first started this whole thing, everyone thought we were crazy for advertising on our website that way as well, being where we are. And I think that's actually what has allowed us to be offered the position to merge and to allow us to grow, and why the Superior Court judge ended up coming to us. I encourage everyone to just be themselves and be true to themselves and not necessarily be influenced by what's around them.
Yeah, that's great. Great way to sum this up and end the podcast. Hailey, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest on the show, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.